One day, a call is made for participants in a new reality show where 8 contestants must battle for survival on a remote island. The selection process is rigorous, leading many hopefuls to drop out early due to the daunting challenges. Ultimately, the competition commences, and the participants are briefed on the survival rules. They must fend for themselves, stay warm, avoid injuries, and find their own food. On the island of Solom, the host welcomes the contestants and encourages them to applaud their progress past the preliminary stages. The last person remaining on the island will be declared the winner. Anyone wishing to leave the competition can use the button on their radio or head to an evacuation point. As the contestants spread out to their assigned locations, the host begins the countdown, signaling the start of the game. In the opening scene, a woman struggles to start a fire with makeshift tools and complains about the wet conditions, noting that modern people are unfamiliar with traditional techniques. Despite her frustrations, she continues working on her task. Meanwhile, the second participant addresses the camera, expressing the need to find shelter on the island. He roams the island for a while before discovering a fantastic spot protected from the wind by sheer cliffs, almost like a luxury resort where he decides to set up camp. He gathers branches to build his new shelter and takes in the beauty of the surrounding nature. Meanwhile, an unidentified object orbits high above Earth. On the island, each participant is busy exploring their surroundings, hoping to settle in comfortably. The excitement is palpable, with one participant, Carol, even feeling as though she's been preparing her whole life for this moment. Meanwhile, footage of Earth reveals a desolate, devastated landscape as a humanoid alien explores the planet. On the island, Paul is more serious and focused, fully understanding the challenges ahead. The first thing he does is throw his radio into the sea, cutting off any possibility of returning to civilization. Carol continues her exploration and stumbles upon a blooming hydrangea. She marvels at the flowers and gently touches one, but as she moves away, the flower flickers as if it's a hologram. Liam is busy preparing his bow and setting off to hunt, while the alien continues to survey the ruined planet. As night falls, Emma records her first video. She hasn't eaten all day and is constructing a shelter from a piece of plastic she brought with her. She decides to think about food tomorrow and would love to get some rest, though the island's noises make it difficult. As the sun rises, Dai welcomes the dawn on the shore in a Buddhist manner, delighted to be alone with nature. Completely undressed, he heads toward the water. Meanwhile, Paul destroys his camera and leaves the fragments on the shore, but they soon flicker and vanish without a trace. The first participant wakes up in her makeshift shelter and records a video, expressing frustration over her initial failure to start a fire. However, her persistence pays off as she finds snails and is glad she brought a pot, planning to make snail soup. Unfortunately, she slips on a rock and falls, later recording another video to announce that she has broken her leg and must withdraw from the game. She says goodbye to her viewers and presses the exit button, but as she does, she begins to flicker and then collapses, dying. Meanwhile, Scott is working on a fishing net when Liam, carrying his bow, appears on the shore. Scott greets him warmly, though he had expected participants wouldn't see each other. Suddenly, Liam raises his bow, preparing to shoot, prompting Scott to flee. Liam chases him into the forest, periodically shooting arrows at his back. Scott eventually manages to hide from the pursuing archer. Back on the shore, Dai informs viewers that he is building a raft for fishing. In real life, he works as a bailiff and is determined to win. Carol shares her good fortune with viewers, mentioning her initial trouble finding shelter, until Paul, who had issues with his camera, came to help. Paul suggested teaming up, but as they talk, Paul hears strange noises and instructs Carol to hide behind a wall. He picks up a stick and hits Scott, who has emerged from behind a rock, but not too severely. Scott, furious, complains about being attacked by a lunatic with a bow. Paul visibly tenses up, starts asking questions, and then admits he was expecting this. He tells Carol to prepare for what's coming. The others are puzzled by how Paul could have anticipated the behavior of an unknown participant, but he doesn't explain further and walks away. Meanwhile, Emma is searching for food but stumbles upon the body of the deceased woman. Terrified, she runs back to her shelter. At night, Carol reflects on why Liam chased Scott, finding the act of killing someone on live television to be irrational. She shares that she has always been considered strange, talking to objects and having her first friend as a weed, which other children did not understand. A doctor once called it a gift. In the morning, Carol wakes up from a nightmare in which she was in a strange place but finds herself still in the same forest. Scott greets her when a scream is heard and Paul appears, urging them to run. An arrow strikes a tree as they flee into the forest, with Liam pursuing them and occasionally shooting arrows. They manage to escape and reach the shore, where they find Dai. Upon hearing about the attack, Dai is ready to call for rescue, but Paul argues that doing so would mean admitting defeat. He suggests climbing higher for a better view. The group heads to the mountains, and Carol expresses suspicion about Di's accent. Soon, they find Emma rummaging through the backpack of the deceased woman. Emma, scared, is persuaded to stay with them and breaks down, admitting she feels like someone is watching her. Di suggests using the radio, but Scott then discovers the deceased woman's radio and plays her last message, which reveals that after pressing the button, she simply died. On the other side of the island, another participant dies from a sharpened stake. The next morning, Carol wakes up before the others and, after exploring, discovers stunningly beautiful plants. She excitedly tells the group about this incredible place she's found. Liam then approaches her and reveals that he needs to know the truth because the beauty is disappearing. He confesses that he is a judge who doesn't want to harm anyone, but you must signal those who will kill because they haven't helped people. He leads Carol to the others, but the men attack him, sparking a fight. During the struggle, Liam pushes Carol forcefully, causing her to fall and hit her head on a rock. Carol regains consciousness in an unfamiliar room, holding a strange transparent sphere. On the shore, the alien stands with glowing blue eyes, gazing at the ocean with delight. However, it starts to flicker and then disappears as if hearing something. Carol then wanders through a space that resembles an office. A screen turns on, and a man on camera explains that if someone is watching the video, it means they are the last one on the station and he is either dead or hiding in a bunker. He advises against going outside and hopes that everything will be forgotten. Carol comes to her senses and finds herself being carried on a stretcher. She acknowledges that something strange is happening, but Paul reassures her. They soon discover the second participant, who was killed by a wooden stake. Reaching the seashore, the men explain that they have dealt with the body and now need to secure themselves. Meanwhile, Liam regains consciousness in a pit and climbs out. Carol tries to get answers from Paul, realizing that Liam needed him the most. She begins to have visions of an institution or laboratory. Paul then reveals that life on Earth has ended due to environmental poisoning, nuclear war, and depleted resources. The game on the island represents humanity's last chance for survival. He was a radio astronomer who received a message from aliens promising to save the best of humanity. Everything around Carol is a projection in her mind, and her body is currently at the station for selection. Carol struggles to believe what she's been told and comes to her senses in the same institution. An alien, referring to her as Solum, which means special or unique, introduces itself as a collector created in her mind to aid in understanding. The alien asks to see her sphere, and as Carol hands it over, the alien seems to absorb its energy with satisfaction. Carol then finds herself in a white space and demands answers. The alien reveals that everything around them is a construct for this meeting. It explains that it is a program designed for first contact. Although humans have sent messages to the stars for years and they have received responses, they cannot save everyone. Carol reaches for the sphere and is suddenly shown images of burning forests, melting glaciers, and widespread disasters. She sees people suffering, missiled by their leaders who assure them of safety until the end. Carol then regains consciousness by the campfire, where Paul claims they are in an alien laboratory, but the others refuse to believe him and argue. Paul explains that aliens have placed spheres around the world to conduct a selection process and choose the most worthy individuals. He and his friend Liam had learned to deceive the spheres, and Carol has developed a new method of communication due to her uniqueness. The next morning, the group spots Liam and flees. Paul instructs Carol to hide on the highest peak, emphasizing that only one person will survive. He then confesses that he was her husband. Carol urges the others to hurry to the mountain, but a wooden stake suddenly flies from the forest and kills Di. Liam appears, but Paul intercepts him with his own bow. Liam explains that the aliens never intended to save them and charges at Paul. The two men engage in a fierce fight, with Liam aiming to win the game and bring a bomb to the alien ship. Liam emerges victorious, and Carol screams in horror. Scott, however, reminds her that her husband sacrificed himself. As they continue to flee, Emma twists her ankle, and Scott suggests setting a trap. Liam spots Carol and learns she was left behind due to her injured ankle. Scott and Carol attack Liam, but he manages to grab and kill Emma. Despite being wounded by Scott, Liam directs Carol to the peak where the game's exit is located, while he stays behind to guard the defeated enemy. Scott realizes the truth in Liam's claims when Emma's body starts to flicker. He acknowledges that only one will survive and asks to be killed since he cannot surrender. Scott raises his spear. Meanwhile, Carol reaches the summit and Scott presses the radio button. A sphere appears before Carol, and the images of all the deceased participants begin to flicker strangely. Carol sees all the participants lying deep in the forest, but as the simulation starts to close, the island vanishes. Carol finds herself on the floor of the laboratory with the sphere in her hand, surrounded by the bodies of the other participants. She bids them farewell and follows the alien outside. Wearing a protective helmet, Carol approaches an alien ship. She boards the ship and finds 5 other unknown individuals who have also emerged as winners from the game and passed the alien selection. Together, they look out at the destroyed Earth as the film ends. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for more.